I was wondering what my return to Grand Rapids after an absence of 57 years would be like, and I certainly didn't expect that it would be another terrifying drive across the state. I used to teach at Michigan State in 1957. I was a young instructor, and so nobody wanted to teach the winter term course in sociology at Grand Rapids. I couldn't figure out why, but being poor and a young instructor, I volunteered. Well, it snowed for 10 straight Thursdays, going and coming from East Lansing. And of course, last night the flight was canceled from Detroit, so we thought we would rent a car, but there were no cars to rent. And then remembering that Gleaves said, don't worry about the expenses, just be sure you save receipts. I did save the receipt. We rented a taxi. Thank you, Gleaves. I noticed in the lobby you have a business honor roll here, and I just stared at it and I realized the top name on the left was the Bissell Company. And I do remember one of the students in 1957 was Hillary Bissell. I don't know, well, she was one of the bright progressive students in the class, and maybe she didn't find my liberal orientations disturbing. At any rate, that's my background with regard to Grand Rapids. I'm delighted to be here for this conference. My beginning in public life goes back to 1957 at Michigan State. With a number of other young Turks on the faculty, we thought it would be good to organize a union, since 4 of the 7 trustees of Michigan State were union leaders, and they urged us to organize, and then you can lobby for better salaries. And so the 3 of us thought, well, we'll get an AFT charter and go off and organize this 1,100 faculty group. Well, after 6 months, we had 60 names with $5 from each person. Half of them said, we'll give you the $5 if you promise not to put our names on any public list. Now, this was the McCarthy era, and people were afraid, but somehow we were too young to be afraid, I guess. So with $300, we said, what should we do with this? And we called a local air flying school and learned that you could rent an airplane and get one of those banners to fly over Spartan Stadium for $150, so that we thought that was a good investment. And then we wrote up a news item to go with the banner. It happened that Michigan State and Wisconsin were playing on national television in late October. And so I, with my other colleagues, were in the stands, not worrying about the first half, worrying about halftime. And sure enough, at halftime, an airplane flew over Spartan Stadium, and it said, raise faculty salaries. It got national television, and so did our press release, which said, and this group said that a new assistant professor with a PhD should get $10,000 a year. The reporter's voice rose as he reported our outlandish salary, and an associate professor should get the same salary as the football coach at Michigan State, who was Duffy Daugherty. Well, you can see the impact we've had on faculty salaries as a result of that outburst. More recently, and how I became active in the Kerry campaign, well, I should identify myself. I am New Haven born Catholic, Italian, Democrat, and Yankee fan. In our family, those were the 4 criteria for being a good member of the family. And apparently I was a cradle Democrat. I happen to remember the 1932 election. I was then 6 years old. And the day after the election, the gang of kids in our neighborhood were marching around, all of us shouting in the street language of the time, Hoover's in the garbage can. Now, we've reflected on that. That was the street language of 1932. Now I understand why some of the conservatives in our society have nostalgia for the old days of that kind of street language when they think about today's street language. At any rate, that was my foray. In 1994, I reviewed a book entitled Catholicism and Liberalism for the journal The Responsive Community, organized and run by Dr. Amitai Etzioni, a very public intellectual, and the founder of the Communitarian Network. The theme of the book is that the Catholics had a major contribution to make to American society at this point. Remember, this is 10 years ago. Given American society's strong tendencies towards individualism, the Catholic ethic of concern for the commons, the needy, the special option for the poor, the environment, and the family should provide American society with just the set of values needed to overcome the strong individualistic, self-oriented strain that was then prevalent in American society, and thus bring a proper balance. That's 10 years ago. I would say, look at us now. The ethic somewhat buried as a result of the most recent election. Well, how did I become actively involved? In the spring of 2000, I became aware of a news item about Republicans organizing a group of Catholics for Bush, which caused me to be somewhat disturbed. It seemed wrong to me, and I thought it was morally outrageous. Here's a candidate who's pro-death penalty, never found a death penalty that he didn't enjoy, had a poor record on education if you look beyond his record, his verbal record, and a poor record on health care in Texas. So it seemed to me obvious that if you look carefully at the record, this was not a person for Catholics to be supporting. But it was also clear to me when I looked at who was organizing this that there were a group of very important Catholics in support of this effort. They had the money, and they were using the anti-abortion stand of Bush to build a rationale for their position. Now, it happened that I had for a couple of years been studying the voting patterns of House and Senate Democrats and Republicans on abortion as a single issue. I had just become interested, wondering how Catholics voted really in the House and Senate on abortion, and when did things change to what they are today. And then I was comparing those with key votes over time. I'll spend more time on this tomorrow afternoon. And so I was aware that on the basis of the way House and Senate people voted on a mass of issues that the U.S. bishops said were reflective of the Catholic social teachings, except for abortion, that the Democrats won the day. So with another colleague who used to teach at Oakland, Michigan, and is now retired in the Washington area, we put together an article entitled, "By Their Votes You Shall Know Them," and published it in the National Catholic Reporter, a liberal newspaper in Kansas City, Missouri, which has, of course, a publication reading list of about 100,000, most of whom were already converted, so we were publishing to the converted as it turned out. But the story made sense to us, and that was my first foray into the political maelstrom. Now, it turned out, of course, that my wife and I went off to Australia for our 50th wedding anniversary and had to listen to the election results on the Australia National Radio from driving while we were driving around Australia. And of course, we returned to the U.S. and the results still weren't clear. Now move ahead to this year. In March, I'm at the Women's National Democratic Club. Believe it or not, I'm a member of the Women's National Democratic Club. And my daughter said to me yesterday, I was at a board meeting, do the women realize that you're not one of them, Dad? Oh, I said, I am in spirit. It seems that actually they cherish having one or two members on their board. This was a luncheon, and the guest speaker at the luncheon was Stanley Greenberg, a pollster of some reputation, whose wife is Rosa DeLauro, a Democratic congresswoman from New Haven, Connecticut. It happens that Rosa and I are friends and connected by Paisani. She saw me there. She was there, and she came running up to me and said, "Bill, believe it or not, I just saw your article from the 2000 National Catholic Reporter. Where have you been hiding it?" And of course, I couldn't believe anybody still had the article. Somebody had dug it up. She said, "We didn't realize to what extent our votes reflected the Church's teachings. Thank you. Can you come and talk to us about it?" So as a result, I met with Rosa and a group of Catholic Democrats in the House and realized that they actually met weekly and talked about their religious beliefs and how they affected their voting patterns. And she insisted that included in their group were a number of pro-life Democrats. Some of you don't know that 1/3 of the House, the Democrats and Catholics in the House, vote pro-life all the way through. And some of them are from Michigan. So they are 100% pro-life voters in the way in which the late Cardinal Bernardine talked about a consistent ethic of life. But the two of them work together. They don't work at odds with each other. Out of that meeting, a number of things. Actually, we met a couple of times. A priest friend of mine who shares my view of the world, and I met with her and talked with her and urged them to have some kind of a meeting with the press to talk about the way in which they see religion, including a mixture of pro-life and pro-choice Catholics. And they did that. And again, the National Catholic Reporter ran a feature on it. But also the Washington Post and the New York Times ran a feature on a press release, a press conference that they had. That also resulted in a meeting that they had with Cardinal McCarrick of Washington, the only cardinal, one of two cardinals who spoke out in defense of not of the pro-choice position, but their argument was that the Holy Communion should not be used as a political mechanism in this or any other campaign, that the challenge was to dialogue with people like pro-choice Catholics. And so that ended up as one of the positives from this. Later, I got a phone call in July, believe it or not. Now, this is July. I received a phone call from another friend of a friend who said, would you like to join a group of Catholics for Kerry? And we'd be meeting Tuesday at the Kerry campaign headquarters, trying to get more religion into the party and into Kerry's own talks, public talks. So I said, sure. And I went, and I was surprised by a number of things. The size of the group. There were, in fact, a number of priests there. Indeed, some priests quite well known nationally. And so I was delighted to see that they weren't afraid to take a stand. And there were a number of laity. I have to confess that I thought some of them were in the Republican camp, but there they were working or willing to work hard to bring some more religious dialogue into the Kerry campaign. There were some holdovers from the Gore and Clinton campaign also. Actually, I thought they should have been in charge of this whole effort. In retrospect, it seems we were very naive and unprepared. Here was July, and this group had just organized in late May, early June, and we were trying to compete with Karl Rove, who'd been working with the evangelicals and the conservative Catholics for 4 years. We were totally unprepared, and we were trying to decide things like, well, where do we go? What do we do? What cities and states in the battleground area should we focus on? The first thing I think about as I reflect on this was too many people talking too much, but all of them were great ideas. I couldn't believe the creative ideas that this group had. Unfortunately, there was no structure. Here I am, a sociologist, and I wasn't even thinking of structure myself. I was saying, oh, that's a great idea, that's a great idea. Oh, I didn't know he knew them. One of the most important ideas I thought that we never implemented, and in part because of the way in which the people, I think, now these are all my reflections on what happened. We all felt, at least I felt that we felt, that around Kerry were a group of people afraid to introduce the religious factor. They just thought that was wrong. And to the extent that I know something about Kerry personally through his pastor, whom I do know in Boston, Kerry just did not feel that religion should be overt the way Bush was using it. It just felt uncomfortable. But we felt that that was wrong. And we had situations set up through these priests that we had on this panel who had colleges and universities in Ohio, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, who could guarantee a friendly bishop, a welcoming president of a Catholic university, and an opportunity to speak out as a Catholic, but on things that he really believed. We even had a hospital with a nun as president who was eager to talk about what she perceived as the weaknesses in the Bush health plans that were hurting the poor and the needy. None of these things took place. And I think that's one of the weaknesses was that we did not have a really strong link into the Kerry inner circle until Lockhart and McCurry came aboard, which was almost too late. Nevertheless, what happened was that over time, the Catholics for Kerry morphed into People of Faith for Kerry. And some of the important things that happened was the development of coalitions of Lutheran ministers, Jewish rabbis, and Catholic priests at local levels courageous enough to stand up and help organize movements within the battleground areas. Obviously, they didn't do enough, but the effort was made, and there was the beginnings of a realization, at least it's in my mind, that at the heart of the Democratic Party principles are the principles that you find in Judaism's teachings about social responsibility, that to whom much is given, much is expected. The mainline Protestant church's teachings on the social gospel, and the Catholic Church's teachings on social justice. Nevertheless, it is quite clear that the Democrats are also burdened greatly by their position on abortion. And as long as the Democrats are leaning on Naral and Emily's List to compete with the evangelicals and the conservative Catholic bishops, I think they lose the debate. The most impressive thing out of this, as I look back now, is that with about 5,000 volunteers, finally, in the last stages of this movement, we have decided that this is the beginning of the 2008 movement to bring a religious perspective into the Democratic Party to a degree that we never have had before. Thank you very much. Is there time for any questions? Yes, if anybody wishes to ask any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them. Oh, yes, sir, I'm sorry, I didn't see. Yes, please. Oop, I can't hear.
This question is something I'm concerned about, and I hope it fits in with your theme here, but I'm concerned about the level of hatred and the nastiness and the cynicism involved with this recent election, and where do you expect this to go from here? Is it going to snowball, get worse, or what are your views on that?
Right. The question, the level of hatred, vituperation, anguish, and whatever that characterized the campaign. I think we were quite conscious of this. I'd like to believe that the Democrats were less guilty of it than the Republicans, but it really doesn't matter because there was enough on both sides. I have to begin again with the abortion issue, which is so troubling, that if you use that in a language that identifies people who are identified as pro-choice, my new argument with the Democrats has to be that the Democratic Party sustains the Constitution. As long as the Constitution says a woman has a right to an abortion, the party is supporting a constitutional right. It doesn't mean the party is supportive of any kind of abortion. To begin there. But if you're called a murderer because a woman who has been raped chooses to have an abortion, I just can't in conscience see how people can call that a murder. The murder is of that woman who's been raped. But we can't even get a dialogue. Until such time as we get the beginnings of a dialogue where instead of you yelling at and calling me a murderer and I calling you insensitive, we try to understand what this issue is all about and how we could at least reduce abortions. One of the proposals I've made to the Democratic Party leadership is that beginning with the next session to prove that they have some pro-life spirit and to test the pro-life spirit of the Republicans, that since the Republicans argue that every pregnancy should be brought to term, that to show that we really care about that fetus once it becomes a person, that we guarantee health care insurance to that infant and any mother who has no health care insurance through the first 18 years of life. Now that costs taxpayers money, but if you're pro-life, you shouldn't just be pro-life for the fetus. And that the second part of the program ought to be that we support raising the minimum wage to a living wage. But if we start yelling at each other, we won't get anywhere. We've got to find ways to dialogue. Now, maybe one of the best ways will be the entrance of the Interfaith Alliance into the fray. I don't know if anybody know what the Interfaith Alliance? Good. It is made up of the mainline Protestant churches, Presbyterian, Lutheran, the 9 of them, and all the major religious groups, Jewish groups, except the very Orthodox Jews. Now, every one of them has a position on abortion that gives a woman a right to abortion under some circumstances. But they have been silent throughout this whole 8 years in which abortion has festered. I have been urging the leadership, Welton Gadde, a Reformed Baptist minister, as president, to enter the dialogue as a major religious group, not afraid to speak out. If the Protestants and the Jews who support abortion don't speak out, then it's left to NARAL versus the religious groups, and I think that's a losing battle. Only if you can get religious groups to enter and begin this dialogue can we hope for some change in tone. And that may, if abortion arguments don't change in tone, then I don't see any hope of anything else changing. Any other comments? Yes? The media, right. I hear what you're saying. It's very interesting. The taxi driver who took me from my apartment in Washington to the airport yesterday was listening to a conservative evangelical Christian on the 5 o'clock show, and I asked him finally, I said, that's pretty mean-spirited for a Christian to be saying what he's saying. Oh, he says, well, would you rather hear? I said, maybe just some music. Now, the Christian left sees that kind of dialogue as mean-spirited. The Christian right sees C-SPAN and CNN and anything else except the right as somehow communistically oriented or worse. So it's hard. Well, we are just terribly divided. I mean, my data show that there's a high level of polarization in the society, and the religious groups haven't done much to heal the wounds. I mean, a real nice movement might be for evangelicals, conservative bishops, and progressive and moderate bishops and Protestant leaders and Jewish leaders to actually get together and say, we have to start a different kind of a dialogue, and the press has to listen to them. I'm getting older, but I still like to dream. Any other comments? Yes, sir. I hear the question was, in the First Amendment to the Constitution, it says that there shall be no establishment of any religion and no interference with the right of people to form any. But out of that has come, in fact, some very strong religious movements. They are called by social historians the tendency towards American exceptionalism. That means that beginning with Winthrop, Governor Winthrop of one of the Mass colonies in 1620, who happens to be an antecedent of Carey. He's related distantly to the Winthrop family. He saw America as a city on a hill. James Monroe, in the Monroe Doctrine, saw as having a manifest destiny to save the hemisphere. Woodrow Wilson had some of that, and there certainly are tendencies in George W. Bush, and it has been written about how he looks more to God. There is, I think, it is a real danger, and when the movement gets strong as it is right now, that you hear some extremists identifying anybody who doesn't agree with them as not worthy of life, you do worry. I gave a lecture on this in Italy in June, and my Italian friends were just totally astounded at the importance of religion in American society. You should know that they had a vote on abortion in 1976 in Italy, and the pro-abortion forces won 2-1. Then Pope John Paul II came in, and he asked to repeal the law, and the vote on abortion was 4-1. Now the Pope doesn't talk about abortion to Italians. He gives them all communion and, I guess, forgives them. Thank you.